right, so President Cyril Ramaphosa is on a state visit to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Today, the President will engage with South African businesses operating in the kingdom before meeting His Excellency, His Royal Highness King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al-Saud in the afternoon. This is the update now live from Jeddah as we cross to SABC News. Political reporter Samkele Maseko, he's there with video journalist Kwazi Manzi. Samkele, a very good morning to you. Thanks indeed for your time. This is not the first president of the country to be in that kingdom, to strengthen relations, between the two countries. What different are we expecting from this visit by Ramaphosa?
Essentially, Criselda, this is not the first visit that President Ramaphosa has paid to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. This is effectively his second visit. He first came into the kingdom back in 2018-2019 when there was that of increasing fuel prices across the world that was particularly affecting South Africans. The president came here at the time to try and negotiate better oil deals for South Africa in order to cushion the poor and the middle class from those escalating fuel prices. What we are seeing now is that the president is seeking further investments, particularly within the agricultural space and the infrastructure space for the country, and also mining, as we have seen the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, Kwede Mantashe. We've also seen the Minister of Transport, Fikile Mbalula. But I'm going to speak to the man who's responsible for infrastructure in the office of the presidency, Dr. Kwazi Manzi, to speak on the importance of this Saudi and South Africa investment forum, where the president will speak later on this morning to address this particular gathering. Mr. Ramaphosa, the essence of this visit by the president, the importance of it, of getting infrastructure investments into the country, particularly for the mining space and for public infrastructure within the country.
No, thank you very much, Samkele. Yes, it's significant because the focus, as you have mentioned, is on primary sectors of the economy, mining and also agriculture. They've got the highest employment absorption capacity. So what we are seeking to do is to look for new markets, and we think that the Gulf state, the Middle East countries provide us with a pristine opportunity for exports, and of course we are able to drive production and capacity utilization back home in the country. So these are significant sectors for the purposes of domestic growth, but also South Africa asserting itself both on a continental and a global scale as a significant player in the overall economy. And of course there are new frontiers that are beginning to emerge. The issues around green hydrogen as a form of clean technology to power what we call hard-to-abate sectors like aviation and maritime. We know that the Saudis have invested significantly in the green hydrogen space. In fact, there's the single biggest green hydrogen production plant in the country, in the world rather, is currently constructed here in Saudi Arabia. So it's about those exchanges, but we know for purposes of technology, South Africa is up there amongst the best in the country. Some of our marquee companies like Sasol are significant players in the hydrogen space. So we're looking to ensure that we're able to ride on this wave, but also there are significant benefits to the South African economy, employment creation, and elevating our contribution to the transition to a low carbon economy is going to be propelled, if you like, by these technologies that are emerging. And Saudi provides an opportunity for us to cooperate, collaborate, and seek opportunities.
Mr. Ramaphosa, when you look particularly within the agricultural space, you look currently that the Saudi Arabian kingdom imports citrus from South Africa in the main. Other fruits such as your bananas and such as your other fruits such as your apples, they are imported largely from Canada, from Australia, within this country. How do you then broaden Saudi Arabia's imports of other agricultural fruits from South Africa?
Well, the first thing is first to announce our market to them, to say that we can provide, if you like, deciduous fruit, that in fact some of the produce that we are producing in the country is one of the best quality. Of course, for us to be able to export a broad range of other products, it's important that we are able to comply with their rules here before we land our products here. So it's important that we get to be introduced on what those requirements are to access the Saudi market from a quality quality point of view, the issues of health. So those are the considerations that we need to make before we consider Saudi as one of those countries for us to export. And of course, we have started those conversations, those discussions. We get to be introduced to learn more about what their requirements are, so that when farmers, producers at home are producing, they must have in mind what the requirements for the export market is, and in this instance is Saudi. And we are confident about the amount of progress that we have made, and I'm sure that when Minister Didiza comes back to announce to the country as part of the package of what has come out of this conversation, we are likely going to deliver good news to farmers, producers in the country, and of course we are going to broaden, if you like, the export market, and the benefit of that is that we are able to produce quality employment at source. And agriculture, as mentioned before, has got the highest employment absorption capacity, so we're able to address, if you like, the monster of unemployment in our country, but also expand the revenue streams for the national pay, so that we get to reinvest money in other priorities in our country.
Dr. Ramaphosa, when you also look at public infrastructure in South Africa, you look at some key public infrastructure is dilapidating in our country. You look at the infrastructure here within the Middle East, particularly in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. What can South Africa learn when it comes to infrastructure development and making sure that contracts are finished on time, job specs are drawn correctly, and there is no fraud and corruption and looting in those public infrastructure projects?
Well, a few things, and a lot of them are unknown to us, really. We are not introduced to something that is unknown. So there is a significant underspending in the country in relation to infrastructure. So there is a fiscal injection to support infrastructure, but there's a poor performance in relation to that infrastructure. So the first one is that you have to address the procurement environment to allow for an accelerated delivery of this infrastructure in our country. And of course, we have to address the issues of skills. Those who are responsible for the value chain of procurement have to have a deeper knowledge about what infrastructure is about, what the requirements are about, and that's something that we are addressing back home. And also it's about holding people accountable. So it's important that we are able to deliver within the timelines, budget, and the quality that we have promised. I think for a very long period of time in the country, we have had underperformance on the part of contractors, and they really just go scot-free, and there's no penalties that are enforced in relation to underperformance. So what we have learned here, not just here, also when we're in Qatar and other parts of the world, is that you are able to have a proper contract management, and the contractors that enter into that space, they know that there are penalties, and government is serious about enforcing these penalties. But from the state point of view, that we need to have the right quality capacity to be able to deliver this infrastructure. And that's why back home will be going very aggressive on getting the right skills in the right areas of infrastructure to allow us to deliver. There's also a planning paradigm that needs to be fixed, that before you can provide a fiscal allocation to an infrastructure project, we must be convinced and satisfied that in fact all the regulatory requirements are met, the permitting, the licensing is in place before there's a fiscal injection, that all the detailed design are approved, and then we are able to roll out the project once the money is made available. But the current situation now is that project attracts fiscal support. Once they've received that fiscal support, it's only then that the significant planning starts, and that's what accounts for underperformance, if you like, underspending in public sector infrastructure. It's a situation that is receiving attention.
Dr. Ramaphosa, the last question on your side before we try grab the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, Kwazi Manzi, who is in the backdrop. There was a strike that affected the ports in South Africa, particularly the Durban port. Saudi Arabia is one of our second biggest trading partners in the Middle East. How was that strike affecting in imports and exports out of the country, particularly from an infrastructure investment point of view, where you need heavy machinery to come into the country to build infrastructure?
Well, the efficiency of your transport network is significant to the health of the economy of any country. And we know that the major arteries for driving and delivering the economy of our country is largely the ports and also the roads. So if there's disruptions at the level of the ports, it's undermine our ability to both export and import. And I'm sure that the relevant ministers will be able to address that situation. the sooner we resolve the problems of, or the strike rather, the better for the economy. We know we've got significant structural problems in the form of load shedding. You don't want another front to be open in relation to the inefficiency of the transport network. So the sooner that is resolved, the better. Otherwise, GDP is going to contract. A lot of people will be out of jobs. So it's important that we address that. Of course, it requires a political intervention. That's beyond my pay grade. But we'll work with whenever the solution is found to ensure that we address all the backlogs.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kwazi Manzi. As you can see, also the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, Kwazi Manzi, is also part of the South African delegation, particularly looking at seeking those and sorting those much needed investments into the country. We do know that the President of the Republic of South Africa, President Ramaphosa, will be entering the venue any minute from now. I'm just going to try and speak to the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy now. Minister Mantashe, the Saudi South Africa Investment Forum largely seeking to woo and to sort investments in the agricultural and mining space. From a mining perspective, what can South Africans particularly look to in getting those much needed investments into the country?
There are quite a number of areas where we're specializing with experience, starting from mining services into mining itself. We have experience of the deepest mines in the world. We can share that experience with the Saudis and form a partnership that works.
From a business perspective, what are some of the key points that you have shared with the business fraternity that has accompanied the South African delegation to this Saudi South Africa Investment Forum?
Companies are here. They must get opportunities. They must offer opportunities. If we form partnership, it should not be one way. It should be two ways. At this point in time, we have a negative balance of payment compared to Saudi. We should address that, therefore increase our exports to this area. So we are working on that. They are new into mining really. Now they're getting there, moving a little bit from oil to diversify. It's an opportunity for us.
When you look at the issues of energy, particularly in crude oil, South Africa is battling. You were part of those negotiations to get the Central Energy Fund in order to buy the refinery out in Durban, in the Durban port, in the Durban South Port, in Richards Bay, in order to build a refinery for South Africa. How are those negotiations going to buy it from BP and to buy it from Shell?
You must remember, SAPREF, when we're in the middle of those negotiations, then there were floods. Then the story changed altogether because we had to look into whether there is value or not. But the position of SAPREF in Durban is very advantageous. We need to revive that refinery. It may not be in the same form. We may have to get new partners, and we're putting those things on the table to everybody.
Will the issue of oil be part of the deliberations later on today when the President meets His Majesty?
I don't want to speak for the President, but oil is, it is described as fossil. Therefore, everyone must move away from it. I think that the transition is going to be longer than many people anticipate. But Saudis are very determined to reduce dependence on oil. They want to have non-oil revenue of 40% by 2030. It means that we can share experiences and work together.
Just as the just transition in South Africa that is currently happening, how far is that process of the just transition and resolving issues pertaining to load shedding, which may hamper your investment drive here?
Don't mix load shedding and just transition. Load shedding must be addressed as an issue, particularly the question of what I describe as base load crisis, more than an electricity crisis. We have more connected capacity that is not giving us energy. That must be resolved to deal with load shedding. But the just transition means if we're transitioning from coal to others, we can't just switch off coal. We'll have to be systematic, develop alternative economies in those areas. Because if it's just, justice must be seen to be done. Two, it must be about people. They are not numbers. And it must be about communities. Once we get that right, we'll have a just transition.
Thank you very much, Minister Kwazi Manzi. That was the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy in South Africa, speaking about the investment drive that the South African government, led by President Cyril Ramaphosa, is essentially on in Saudi Arabia here in Jeddah. The President will be meeting with His Majesty the King later on this evening in those bilateral meetings, alongside the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, to deliberate on how South Africa and Saudi Arabia can further foster their economic, political and diplomatic ties. Speaking to the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation yesterday evening when President Ramaphosa arrived in Jeddah, Minister Pandor said that those deliberations will also feature the economic meltdown that we are currently seeing within the world, particularly with the high inflation that we are seeing across the world, particularly with the UK Prime Minister firing the Minister of Finance yesterday due to high escalating high cost of living within the United Kingdom, with those inflation going up within the United Kingdom. And also we are seeing the same in South Africa, with the inflation and interest rates in South Africa being hiked frequently. So we are seeing also the issue of the geopolitics that will be discussed later on this evening. And we do know that President Ramaphosa will be going to the G20 summit in Indonesia in about 30 days' time. These matters will also be ventilated there, and we are seeing Minister Pandor saying that South Africa and Saudi Arabia should have a firm standpoint. Griselda.
Samkele, thank you very much indeed, touching on some critical aspects there. The President being on that state visit in a critical time in South Africa, where you have ailing infrastructure, whether you talk about Eskom, the water issues that we're currently experiencing in the country, the high prices of oil that have led to vast increases in the prices of petrol as well as diesel in South Africa. Let's see what results that state visit in Saudi Arabia will yield for the benefit of South Africa in this instance.